Hello, everybody. Tracy, Mrs. JDog Flanagan with you here today. I'm the co-founder and senior vice president at JDog Brands. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Tactical Treasures, powered by JDog and Bet TV. Our podcast gives veterans, mil spouses, active military members, and military family members a voice in the veteran space to speak about their service, how they're affecting their communities post-service, and they share with me a tactical treasure that has helped them along the way in their military career, business, or life. Today, I am so excited to have on the podcast Paul McCullough. Reverend Dr. Paul McCullough is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel who served for over 20 years. During his service, Paul deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2005 and in 2017 as commander of the DLA Support Team Kuwait. After 20 years of service in the Army, Paul retired in 2018 as Deputy Director for Supplier Operations, Defense Logistics Agency. Post-service, Paul is president of the Association of the U.S. Army's Penn and Franklin Greater Philadelphia chapter and an Army Reserve ambassador from Pennsylvania. He also holds a doctorate in business administration from Walden University and currently serves as senior field manager within the Armed Services Ministry of the American Bible Society. Thank you, Paul, for joining us today. I'm so pleased to have you on.
Tracy, thank you so much for the kind words and the introduction, and absolutely honored to be here with you here today.
Oh, thank you. That's great. So, Paul, I would love if you could talk about your military service. What inspired and led you to join the Army?
So a couple of things. One, I am third generation Army. So my father and my grandfather before me, we all have the same name, and we all joined the Army at the age of 17, raised our right hand, and swore to protect and defend the Constitution.
Wow, that's incredible. You all have the same name? Oh, wow. That's really awesome.
Quite honestly, I am very excited to say that my son is now going to be fourth generation Army. He is Paul the Fourth, and he is continuing the legacy. He is joining the Florida National Guard, and in 3 years, he will be an Army officer.
Oh, wow. How exciting. How proud you must be. That's awesome. Yeah, what an amazing legacy of your family.
Yeah.
Was there a specific aspect or moment of your service that really had an impact on you?
So when I was a young officer in company command, when I first took over, the brigade commander, who was a 06, she came up to me within the first few days of her taking over as brigade commander. And she said, "Well, Captain, right now you have a problem because your company, I consider to be one of the worst in the brigade. You've been on the blotter several times. And that's not a good thing. And so you have my attention in not a good way." Now, those blotter incidents were not during, like, I had just taken over, right?
Right.
And she's telling me that my unit is not doing well, and, just all kinds of things where she's not happy with my unit. And so I went and talked to my first sergeant, and he told me in no uncertain terms that if I was going to be successful in company command, it needed to be about my soldiers and not about me being successful. So I needed to reverse the paradigm.
Right.
And so I started having a whole lot of conversations with my drill sergeants, as well as my soldiers, about the idea of creating a sense of family. And so during the weekend safety briefings, I would get up and I would talk about the idea of, hey, you wouldn't want your family name being dragged through the mud. Well, nor do I want to have our good family name of this company being dragged through the mud. And so as the father, the commander of the organization, I felt that it was my job to care for them, provide for them, protect them, as a father would do for his family.
Right.
And so I put in place a wide range of programs designed to help enhance the soldier's experience. So not just physically in PT and whatnot, but emotional, mental, spiritual, social, all kinds of different things that we did to help give them a better experience and help it make it feel like a sense of family. And so within a very short period of time, we went from being a zero to a hero. Our company was selected as honor company by the brigade commander, and we stayed as honor company every single quarter thereafter until I gave up command. And so when she came by my company for the quarterly training brief, she said, "You have really turned this company around. What have you been doing?" And so I told her about my program. She said, "That's good leadership. Well done."
Yeah. Wow. I love that analogy too, because, it's one thing to be part of a company and think of it like, your brothers, your sisters, be a team, blah, blah, blah. But when you kind of put it together with the analogy of family, I think that really would click and resonate with everybody. They would like
Yeah.
totally get it. So what a great system you put in place. That's really awesome. So you served for 20 years. What was your transition like out of the Army after so long being in?
I will tell you the most painful thing about getting out of the military was trying to figure out what I was going to wear. Because for 20 years, I wore the same uniform and I have no suits. I have nothing appropriate. But aside from that, it was really a challenge to figure out where I was going to land and what kind of career I wanted to have. I felt a strong calling in my life to ministry, and I'd already began the course and the work for ministry credentials, but I had not landed the plane on that yet. And so
Right.
there's a gentleman I've been friends with for a long time. His name is Honorable Patrick J. Murphy. And he and I went to school together in undergrad nearly 30 years ago. And so I reached out to him and prior to retirement, maybe a month or so prior to my retirement ceremony. And I said, hey, and he was no longer the secretary, so I could call him Pat, right? Because I was on a first name basis with him for a long time. And I said, hey, Pat, I'm not sure if you are available. I know you're a busy guy, but I would love to have you come and just be at my retirement ceremony. And oh, by the way, I know you're well connected. So here's my resume. So if you know anybody that's looking for a retired lieutenant colonel with a doctorate degree, please pass it along. So he calls me up the Saturday before Memorial Day. And he says, Paulie, are you standing at attention? It's the Honorable Patrick J. Murphy. And he said, well, first of all, I'm not just coming to your retirement. I'm going to speak at your retirement. So to me, if the Secretary of the Army wants to speak at my retirement, who am I to say no?
Right.
And then the next piece, he said, well, I looked at your resume. I'm not going to pass it along. I'm going to keep you for myself. He said, I just started up a small business with another gentleman, and I think you'd be a good fit. Do you want to come in for an interview? I said, well, I would love to. So the day after Memorial Day, I went in for an interview and I walked out with a job. And so I stayed there for about a year, but around 6 months in, I quickly discovered that was not what God had for me. I was putting in 18-hour days, and I had to step away from everything I was doing at church and ministry and just all my service type organizations because I was spending so many hours in the workplace.
Sure.
And so I did a Google search around 6 months in, and all I typed in was ministry in Philadelphia. And that landed me at the American Bible Society, and I've been there since.
Wow. That's a great story. I love it. But hey, you look wonderful. You obviously got your fashion all situated and figured out. Hello, viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Tactical Treasures podcast. I would like to tell you about Irreverent Warriors. The mission of Irreverent Warriors is to bring veterans together using humor and camaraderie to improve mental health and prevent veteran suicide. The Silkies Hike is the organization's largest event that takes place throughout the nation. The purpose of the Silkies Hikes is to bring veterans together to improve mental health and to honor the military's old tradition of wearing silkies. These hikes take place in 70 to 80 cities across the country every year. They've even done a few overseas. You can find out more about IW if you go to their website, irreverentwarriors.com, and I'll spell that for you, IRREVERENTWARRIORS.com. Once there, you can click on the events tab and see where there is a hike close to you. You can also sign up for the newsletter, which will keep you in the know about all things IW. You can go to Facebook and search IW in your city and join the Facebook page to engage with veterans involved in the hike and find out when there's one close to you or in your city. If you are a veteran, active military, or reserve, you are allowed to hike. If you are a civilian, mil-spouse, veteran spouse, they need volunteers to drive safety vehicles, help with registration, snacks, water, and everything else they may need. So check them out, irreverentwarriors.com. Now back to the podcast. Right now, so you currently serve as a senior field manager within the Armed Services Ministry of the American Bible Society. Could you talk to me about the work that you're doing there and the mission?
Sure. Thank you for that. So I've been with ABS for about the last 3.5 years. And the overall mission that I've been given is to get the word of God into the hearts and hands of veteran service members and their families across the country. So that's a pretty broad mission set. When you dial that down, What that means is I am making phone calls and going out to conferences and doing base visits to chaplain pastors or military ministry leaders that have reach, that have influence, that can spread the word to other veteran service members and ministry leaders. And so we have two really new, exciting things that we are coming out with. In the one is actually on the street now, and the other one is going to be coming out in the fall. So the first program, it's a digital adaptation of something we launched about 2 years ago called the Military Bible Challenge. So this is a 75-day Bible reading plan, and it's nothing more than the fundamental stories of the Bible and the nature of God's love. So previously, this was just available on hard copy. So now as an app, it is far more engaging. There's music, there's stories, there's pictures, there's sound effects and video clips and all different kinds of things to keep you engaged, including some questions to help make you understand, all the different things that you're learning about and reading. And so that is the first thing. And then the second part is called Operation Recon. And so that is coming out in the September-October timeframe. And this is a really great tool to help people take their next step in their spiritual journey. And so it's based on the book of Mark, and it's got three main components. So if you picture something like Netflix, where you have bingeable content, we have developed bingeable content, taking other people's stories, their spiritual journey that they've been willing to share with us, and making it into these little episodes of bingeable content where you can watch somebody's journey, their story. The second piece is, if you would think about masterclass, instead of having Gordon Ramsay teach you how to cook, we have a senior pastor of a large church, and he comes on and he starts explaining excerpts from scripture, again, from the book of Mark, helping you really digest the Bible in ways that are meaningful and understandable, that can, again, help you on your spiritual journey. And the last piece, if you think about something like Peloton that helps you keep track of your physical progress, we help you keep track of your spiritual progress. So how much of the Bible have you read? How often have you read? How often have you prayed? Things of this nature to, again, help you along the pathway of scripture engagement in your spiritual journey. So those are two really new initiatives that I think are really exciting, can help a lot of people.
Wow, that's really amazing. I love it. And the idea of an app, oh my gosh, that's how everybody, it seems like everybody functions by apps these days. So that's really great. I know I have a great app on my phone that I use all the time, Prayer. Or Pray, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. But I love it. But that's really great. So you are also the host of your own radio show and podcast, and it's called Serving Our Nation. Could you talk to me about the show? What are some of the topics you've covered and some of the guests that you've had on?
So that is really a point of pride for me. It has been such an honor to host a radio show and podcast for a little over 2 years. And I've had people from all walks of life intentionally. So CEOs, pastors, military ministry leaders, and people that are dedicated to their family. So the premise of the show is that you can be a servant leader in any walk of life, in the military, in business, through faith, through community, or even something as simple as serving your family. And so in that last vein, I even had my 2 kids on, because my children have practiced the mantra of serving other people and serving their family, right? And so it's good to hear other perspectives of, hey, it's fine that you go out to a job and yes, you're providing for your family in that way. But if you just come home and sit in front of the television and you don't engage with your spouse and your kids and you don't help around the house and do things of that nature, well, you're not really serving your family at all, are you? And so being able to hear other people's experiences and how they live out the idea of servant leadership, again, from all those different walks of life, from being a CEO to a senior pastor and all those different areas, I have found it to be very life-giving. Listening to other people's stories gives me more ideas of things that I can do in my own walk. And so just one example, I had a guest on quite a while ago, and she was talking about one of the things that she has been doing is putting together blessing bags. And I was like, man, that is such a great idea.
Wow.
And so I asked my daughter to help me put together these blessing bags. And so now I've got, dozens of blessing bags that I keep in the back of my car. And so these blessing bags have a Bible. It's the Restoring Hope Bible from the American Bible Society. And then there's a pair of socks. There's a water bottle. There's some snacks in there. There's some personal hygiene items in there, right? And I'm also working getting some gift cards from Wawa to, again, just let people know that there is hope, that they are loved, and here's a little something to lift up your attitude and, help keep you going and maybe sustain you a little bit. And so going back to the show, the greatest thing about the show is, one, it helps to expand the network of who I know, but more importantly, listening to each person's story, I'm able to share at the end of each show the nuggets, the lessons learned that I pulled out from each person's story. And so I encourage other people, hey, as aspiring servant leaders, these are things that we can do, and these are things that I can do in my own walk, just like the blessing bags, to be a better servant leader to other people.
Wow, that's great. I love the blessing bags. That's really neat. I love it.
Yeah.
That's an amazing, and that's really interesting. A radio show, podcast. I love the name of it, Serving Our Nation. And you would think that it's like relating only to the military, but it's serving our nation by servant leadership and,
That's right.
And extending God's love and forgiveness to other people and people in your life that you're connected with. That's really great. I love it.
Thank you.
Hello, listeners and viewers. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Tactical Treasures Podcast. We are currently speaking with Reverend Dr. Paul McCullough, who is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel who served for over 20 years. He is doing many things post-service, one being his podcast and radio show called Serving Our Nation, which breaks through the darkness and offers hope and encouragement to listeners. Each week, Paul is joined by servant leaders who have served our nation through their faith, in their community, in the military, in business, or in their families. Their stories demonstrate that when a person focuses on being a servant leader rather than money, blessings follow. You can find and listen to Serving Our Nation across all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Also, you can check out his website, revdrpaul.com or revdrpaul.com. And if you want to connect with him, you can reach out to him via email, paul@revdrpaul.com, revdrpaul.com. So check it out. Now back to the podcast. Okay, so now I would really love to hear about your treasure. So let's dive into that. What would you like to share with us today?
So I have many, but the primary one that I want to share with you is this towel.
Okay.
Okay, it's a towel.
I see that.
The reason that is my tactical treasure, I have that sitting on a filing cabinet right next to my desk. And I look at it every single day of my life. And it is a very strong reminder of the importance of being humble and being a servant leader. And so if you look at my show, the logo for my show has a towel in it. And that towel is about Jesus Christ. On the night of the Last Supper, he got down and he washed the feet of the disciples, right?
Yeah.
And so he very much humbled himself and served those 12 people to model for them what servant leadership looks like. And then he sent them out to go and do the same across the world. And so when I was in Kuwait, I had an opportunity to command again. And the culture there was one that was very upsetting. Just like when I took over a company command as a young captain, in my very first day of taking command as a lieutenant colonel, I had 3 people come into my office and tell me that they wanted to leave. They weren't feeling like they were making a difference. They weren't feeling like they were appreciated. They missed their family. It's hot. And they went on and on with reasons why they wanted to leave. And they asked me to sign the paperwork sending them home early. And I said, well, I would like you to direct your attention to the name outside the door there. So I'm new. I'm not the guy that's been here for the last year or whatever it's been. So I would like you to give me 2 weeks to demonstrate that I can change the culture of this unit, this organization. If you're not happy with the culture that I've created in 2 weeks, then I will gladly sign your paperwork and send you on your way. And so I knew that I needed to create a culture of family and of love, similar to what I did in company command. But now this is, a lieutenant colonel slot, and I'm reporting to 2 general officers, one in the rear and one in the deployed environment. And so I wanted to model that after something I knew worked. So the love languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. I had used those quite extensively in my own marriage. I've been married for 25 years. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take those and I'm going to adapt them to this environment. And so the towel portion came in terms of acts of service. And
Mm.
so I can't be washing people's feet that are in my command, but I
Right.
can wash their vehicles. And so nearly every person in my unit was assigned a vehicle because we had to go out and about and go on missions and so forth. And so we had one day off a week, and that was Sunday. And so prior to our day off, I would find a person in the unit was going above and beyond for the customer. And I said, okay, we are going to switch vehicles prior to our day off. And I'm going to take your vehicle. I'm going to take it to the wash rack. I'm going to personally wash it. I'm going to vacuum it out. I'm going to gas it up. And then I will return that vehicle to you on Monday. And that was just one aspect. That's just the servant leader portion of the love languages. And so very quickly, the climate began to change because they knew that I was really genuinely showing them love. And so my bosses, they were very concerned about driving revenue and the customer and all like that. And when I first started, I said, sir, respectfully, no, that's not my priority. My priority is first and foremost my team and then the customer. And so I continued by that mantra. And after just a couple of weeks, we started getting all kinds of very positive feedback from the customer saying how great of a job our team was doing in caring for them and going above and beyond for them. I said, sir, the proof is in the pudding. Please direct your attention to all these customer comment quotes. And so he very quickly said, okay, you've proved your point. Go on about your business. And at the end of those 2 weeks, those 3 people that wanted to leave, they came into my office and said, sir, I no longer want to leave. I have different paperwork here for you. I would like to extend and stay here for as long as you will be in command. So all of that comes back to the idea of the
Wow.
towel and being
Yeah.
that servant leader like Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I love it. That's a great story. I love that book, by the way. I've read it. It's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
there's a lot
Um,
to learn there.
yeah, a lot, truly. And what an amazing job you did putting that into effect and turning that culture around. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Um, so, do you have some advice for your fellow veterans who are struggling with transition and finding purpose post service? Because I know that's
Yeah, I
kind of
get
a
asked
big
that
thing.
question a lot, Tracy, and I really appreciate you asking me that. I just had an opportunity to speak to a room of about 300 people in my capacity as a ARA, Army Reserve Ambassador, just a
Hmm.
couple weeks ago, and that was the question that I was asked. And
Right.
in my mind, it is everything that we do in life should be about making a difference. Now, my giftings and talents are different than yours, different than your husband's. Everybody has their own unique gifts and talents.
Yeah.
But the real key is finding out how you are wired and what you are passionate about. And there's a lot of tools that you can use to discover those things. There's MBTI, there's Myers-Briggs, and the Clifton Strength Finders, DISC, all those different type of instruments to help you discover how you're wired, what your gifts are. And then from there, you can try to align your passions with those gifts and find somewhere where you can engage. Maybe it's a volunteer organization, maybe it's a second job, but whatever it is, it's using your gifts and talents to make a difference in the world around you. And that difference, quite honestly, has to start at home. You have to use your gifts and your talents
Right.
to care for your family, spend time with your kids, spend time with your spouse. And then from there, you can expand to your church and your community and so forth. It can expand quite rapidly if you are really passionate about what you're doing, you put the time in. But that was the advice that I offered a couple weeks ago, and that continues to be the advice that I would offer to somebody after retirement. If you don't use the gifts that you have been given by God, you can lose those gifts. I mean, there's a whole
Yeah.
parable in the Bible that talks about the
Right.
talents, the 1, the 2, and the 5. And if you
Right.
take your talent and bury it in the backyard, it will be taken away from you. So I would encourage people to use those talents and their giftings in whatever way they can to align with their passions and get out and make a difference in the world in whatever way you can.
That's great advice. Yeah. We are all given gifts, God-given gifts, right? And it's a matter of tapping in, finding out what they are and sharing them with the world because you're right, that's what God wants us to do. That's why he gave us these gifts, right? Because we
Indeed.
can make a difference and even if you're just making a difference in your family or a small community, all that stuff just sort of multiplies.
That's right.
Definitely. So, um, okay, before you go, tell us where people can find and connect with you, and how can we find and listen to your amazing podcast?
Thank you. So I have a website and it's called ReverendDrPaul.com, RevDrPaul.com. And you can go on there and I've written a number of blogs and I've also been asked to start writing for a publication called At Ease Magazine. So the story I told you about Kuwait,
Uh-huh.
I was able to write up that story in its entirety for Army Magazine, which has a 450,000 person readership. And then other people saw that and I got asked to do an At Ease Magazine writing. So that's on my website, my blogs, other media hits, as well as my radio show and podcast. Serving Our Nation is all on there. Again, ReverendDrPaul.com, RevDrPaul.com. And if you want to email me, you just put the Paul at in front of that. So Paul at ReverendDrPaul.com.
All right. That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that you did today. It was just amazing. I love your story. It's great. And you're doing good work, sir. So hats
Thank you
off to
very
you.
much.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for the
And
opportunity.
oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And definitely we'll be checking out your radio show. Thanks for
Okay.
sharing today. Take care.
Thank you.
Hello, viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into this exciting episode of Tactical Treasures podcast. We've just finished up an amazing conversation with the Reverend Dr. Paul McCullough, who is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel who served for over 20 years and is doing many things post-service, one being a radio show and podcast called Serving Our Nation, which breaks through the darkness and offers hope and encouragement to listeners. Each week, Paul is joined by servant leaders who have served our nation through their faith, in their community, in the military, in business, or in their families. Their stories demonstrate that when a person focuses on being a servant leader rather than money, blessings follow. You can find and listen to Serving Our Nation across all your favorite podcast streaming platforms. You can also check out his website, RevDrPaul.com. That's RevDrPaul.com. Or if you would like to reach out to him via email, you can connect with him at Paul@RevDrPaul.com. That's RevDrPaul.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.